Picture this. Matthew Rhys, the guy who spent 6 seasons on the American series, being cold, controlled, terrifying in that quiet KGB spy way. Now, yes, I am talking about that Matthew Rhys. Imagine him standing in the ocean and a sea hag is chasing him. His screams, not like in a strong scream kind of way, but a full unhinged, undignified shriek that sounds like almost like it belongs to a Lonely Tunes episode. And it is one of the best acting choices of the entire show. That single moment, that's basically Widow's Bay in a nutshell for you. Hi, I'm Paula, and this is a space where I talk about movies, books, series, or honestly anything that feels worth sharing. Today we'll talk about Widow's Bay, the Apple TV series that launched in 2026. Quick catch up on what this show is about. Just a little bit of an overview. Widow's Bay is a New England island, 65 kilometers off the shore. No Wi-Fi, spotty cell service, and a couple 100-year-old myths, saying that the place is cursed. And we're talking about nowadays. This is not a 1970s type of series. Tom Lofty, played by Rhys, is the mayor. And he does not care about any of that. He wants tourists. He wants a New York Times travel piece. He wants his sleepy island to become the next Martha's Vineyard. And guess what? He gets his wishes. But that's exactly when things start going wrong. Sea hags, killer clowns, masked boogeymans with decades-old history. Well, it turns out it seems that the superstitious locals were right the whole time. And Tom is stuck fighting to save the town he wants so desperately to put on the map. Underneath all of that, there's something quieter. Besides being the island's mayor, Tom is raising a teenage son alone because his wife died under circumstances that, he spent years refusing to explain. And that thread is the emotional and invisible spin of the whole season that we have watched this year. But that's the setup. Now, let's go back to that Lonely Tunes scream that I was talking about in the beginning. It only works because, one rule was given to Matthew Rhys by the director in the beginning, on day one. And here's what Hiro Murai told him. Don't play comedy, do not play horror, just build a real world with real people, with real backstories, and just play the truth of it. Let the tone sort itself out. That's it. That's the show's engine. And it explains why the scream really works. Because Rhys wasn't going for funny. Rhys was actually scared. It read as a joke, and he kept doing it as a little bit of a joke in the rehearsal until Murray told him, stop performing, just feel it. And the result is terrifying and hilarious all at the same time because it's neither. It's just true scream. So who are these two people behind the rule and the series as a whole? I'll tell you. Katie Dippold created the series, and her resume includes The Heat, the 2016 Ghostbusters, years in Parks and Recreation's writer's room, and that is, it's basically a strong comedy through and through background, which is exactly why Widow's Bay started like a workplace sitcom. Quirky small town, staff with a mayor nobody really respects, all that before some ancient and scary, thing crawls into the frame. Directing this is Hiro Murai. If you know his Atlanta work, you know what he's capable of. Making basically a room feel funny and deeply wrong all at the same time. He directed 5 of the series episodes, including the finale, and handed the rest to a stacked bench that basically is very fun. Horror veteran Ty West, who took the flashback episode into the island's ugly history. Plus Sam Donovan and Andrew D. Young. Recipe of Widow's Bay production? Comedy writer. Plus horror adjacents director. That combination is the whole show before a single scene gets even shot. You really feel the DNA is in the constant references throughout the show. You have Jaws and the mayor who won't close the beach. You have Halloween, you have the fog, you have the Wicker Man. Stephen King is literally sitting on the bookmobile one character drives around town. It's crazy. I kind of laughed at it because these are not Easter eggs, these are like Easter bombs. Now, I'll tell you a little bit more about cinematography. The visual language of Widow's Bay is built on restraint, not spectacle. Cinematographer Christian Sprenger, who also shot key episodes of Atlanta with Murai, including Teddy Perkins, bring that same instinct here. Keep the camera grounded. Let dread build through composition and stillness rather than the horror movie. Murai had said that they deliberately avoided leaning on the aesthetics hallmark of Stephen King or John Carpenter's film. They chose instead to reverse engineer the feeling those movies gave audiences without copying the visual signature. That shows up most clearly in the location work, shooting on real Massachusetts coastline instead of a soundstage, which gives photography genuinely tactical, brainy color. The Hollywood Reporter specifically praised how crisp the photography is, noting that you can practically taste the salt in the shots. It's a look that never announces itself as horror or comedy. The fog rolls in a matter-of-factly. The lighthouse sits in frame like any other building in town. And that flatness is exactly the point, because the camera treats the sea hag and the town hall with the same steady, unbothered eye. The horror feels like it just belongs to the specific real place, rather than being bolted on a genre decoration. Okay, so how can you find a lead who can hold a comedy's writer's sensibility and a horror director's instinct all at once? Because really, think about it. You do not go and say, you know who would be perfect, to think about mixing horror and comedy at the same time? A strong dramatic character. No. Well, that's where they literally took a risk of bringing reason. They basically said that they got him on a Zoom call, found out that he's obsessed about Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, and knew at that a specific moment that he was the guy for the role. Now, you can see why he was perfect in the viral boat seat pet fall. But here's what I actually want to dig into. The casting philosophy does not stop at Reese. It runs through the entire town. Look at who's actually populating Widow's Bay. Let's start with Patricia, played by Kate O'Flynn. She's Tom's deputy and honestly the show's secret weapon. NPR's review singled her out for finding the real heroism inside what could have just been the awkward sidekick role. She's lonely, she's exasperated, but she's never played for cheap comedy relief. She's doing just as much of the play it real work as Reese, and the show trusts her with just as much as emotional weight as it does his. And that philosophy runs straight through the rest of the town. Stephen Root plays Wick, the fisherman who's been insufferably right about the curse for years. And Root plays him with zero cartoonish, the town crazy man energy. He's just a guy who's tired of nobody believing him, which is as much more human note than eccentric doomsayer in town. Dale Dickey plays Rosemary. Working the mayor's front office, she brings this blunt working class, I've seen it all, rudeness that makes the town hall feel like an actual place that people go in, clock in and out every day. Not a horror movie, set dressed as one. Kevin Carroll plays Bashir, the sheriff, and he is the grounding the law and order side of the town in the same understated realism. Kay Kellen plays Ruth, Tom's elderly secretary, and Jeff Hiller, who you might know from Somebody Somewhere, plays Dale. You also might remember him from Pluribus. He's one of the office's regular who helps basically make the town's weird ecosystem as an actually feel and lived rather than sketched. And then there is Kingston Rumi Southwick as Evan, Tom's son. He is bored. He's basically thrill-seeking teenager who never is let out of the island because he legally cannot leave, and who is quietly working through losing his mom while his dad won't tell him the truth about it. Here's the thing that struck me about this cast. Almost none of these performances are big. Nobody's doing the wacky small town character. They're doing kind of real, kind of awkward, a little bit deflated, a little bit real, a little bit strange, real people. We're a bit weird, right? People who talk over each other, who complain about the copy machine, who gossip about the mayor boss behind his back. And that awkwardness is exactly what Murai, plays it real, rule demanded of everyone, not just Reese. One review actually credited this as what sells the show apart from typically horror comedies. where the supporting cast normally usually just orbits around the lead. Here, actually, each of these actors got real matter, so the chemistry feels earned instead of assigned. And that matters structurally too, because these people don't just serve as decorative in the plot. They carry it forward together. Patricia is the one keeping Tom functional day to day while quietly falling apart herself. Wick is the one who drags Tom towards believing the curse is real. Rosemary and Ruth, they're the ones quietly feeding him the town's forgotten history between eye rolls that he does. Bashir is the one who has to actually enforce order once the supernatural stuff stops being just imagination. Evan's arc, a kid slowly learning the truth about his mother, runs underneath the entire season, and it pays off directly in the finale. Nobody here is furniture. Nobody here is just a sidekick. Every one of them either pushes Tom forward the truth or forces him to react to something he does not want to face. That's the ensemble strengthening the lead, not just standing next to him. So casting gamble pays off, and it pays off at every level, not just at the top of the call sheet. But here's the thing about building your show around this many play it real performances all at once. Because play it real is great note for an actor. It is much harder though to sustain as a series of 10 episodes of a plot. The Hollywood Reporter review basically nailed something I couldn't quite articulate myself. Their critics said that the show is incredible at building mood. This constant, something is wrong here. But that it felt less reliable at cashing the tension within. The critic's exact line was something like, she's barked a lot, but laughed almost never. Once she said that, I got a bit intrigued because I personally laughed a lot. But I also could not unnotice something that she said and she brought to my attention. Because comedy needs a release. If a show is always circling dread, even from a genuinely funny ensemble, some jokes land as clever instead of funny. Then there is the critique that stuck with me the hardest. And it actually complicates the praise that I just gave of the whole cast. But you know what? We're complicated humans. So Metacritic pointed that despite the deep bench of grounded, awkward human supporting characters, the island still barely has anyone beyond the core group. A handful of named characters doing the heavy lifting, and that's basically it. No monster actually attacks anybody else. And horror needs victim, not because it's bloody thirsty, but it's because that's how stakes work. You need to be scared for somebody. So even with Patricia, Wick, Rosemary, Bashir, Ruth, and Evan all doing real grounded work, the town beyond them still feels a little bit thin. It's like nothing happens to them, nothing bad happens. Which means when danger arrives, it rarely touches anyone outside the core circle. So generally great ensemble, generally a little bit of a real cost. Not a contradiction, just what happens when a show pours the keep it real philosophy into the character work instead of a, let's say, hit the population size of it all. Not sure if you need to pick a battle, but I'm just sharing with you guys what I found out there. Now, the play real instinct does not stop with the actor. It is baked into where this series was shot. They did not fake New England. Real Massachusetts towns that are very hard to pronounce for me were there. Ayer, Worcester, Essex, Gloucester, Rockport. Murray carries this belief since Atlanta. Not shoot one place pretending to be another will feel the payoff. The Hollywood Reporter specifically called out the cinematography, crisp, brainy photography that makes you feel like you can taste the salt air. And that matters because the whole premise hinges in isolation. Well, I mean, here's the thing. Nobody can really leave the island. So if the place feels like a set, that premise is just lore. But if it feels real, It's an actual trap that I'm scared of. And here's where it all comes together. Tom is a widower. His wife was born on the island, meaning she could never leave. She tried though, once. Tom watched her unravel and die because of this decision. And by the finale, he has to sit with his son and finally tell him the truth. And if you have watched some horror, you know that this is a trick, it's a trend. Grief becomes the monster and the ghost is a metaphor. Widow's Bay, though, does not do that. The scares stay literal. A sea hag is an actual sea hag, while the grief stays completely separate, completely human scale. And I feel most people wanted either a horror or a human story out of this series. Here you have a glimpse of both, and I believe that is what makes Widow's Bay interesting. That's a harder needle to thread than the metaphor version, and it is why the finale lands as hard as it does. But it also leaves so many open questions on the horror side, of course. Like, what are the bells at the end? And what are those tapes all about? Who left them? And who do they leave it to? What will Tom do to get rid of the monsters still existing in the island? Now, what did the critics think about this? Scores bounce around depending on where and when you check. Rotten Tomatoes has touched 100% at a point. Metacritic lands anywhere between generally favorable to universally acclaimed. But everyone agrees on this. Matthew Rhys is the engine of the show, and he is surrounded by a town full of people who feels like they actually live there. And that is a win. Now, please give this man his Amy. He's been deserving since the time of the Americans, for crying out loud. So let's go back to that scream from the beginning, just a little bit, before we wrap this video. That scream, the one in the ocean, sounding completely ridiculous and completely terrifying all at once. That is not just a funny clip. That's a comedy writer and a horror director agreeing on one rule and one rule only, applying to the entire cast of the show, not just the main star. Terrified, awkward, real, human. Everyone needs to be a mix of all those things all together at once. The show isn't flawless. The tension sometimes it does not pay off. The town could have other people being hit by the curse or the monsters, call it however you want it. But it gives us a town of people who actually feel that they lived there their whole lives. It gives us, some scary moments and quite some hard, good laughs, at least to me. And I'll take that trade every single time. Drop your thoughts here below. Have you watched it? Do you remember Rhys and the Americans? Did you get scared watching Widow's Bay? Well, thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time right here. Don't forget to ring that bell. Ciao, ciao!